from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased. Joining me from the US, Mark Vange, who's the founder of Automately. I like to give teaser to the audience. So as you might see from the company name, we're going to talk automation. Of course, we're going to talk AI. We're going to talk also about use cases, is interesting use cases that Mark will let us know more about. But before that, the traditional of the CTO show is I like my guests to introduce themselves. So Mark, tell us a little more about you, your background, your journey, and what brought you to become the founder of Automately.
Thank you, Mehmet. Pleasure to be here with you. My background is I was born in the Soviet Union a long time ago, and after some travels, ended up in Canada at the age of 10 or 11. And I didn't speak English, but I did arrive the same day as the school's first Apple II computer. So I spent a lot of time being one of the really cool kids hanging out with the Apple II computer. I sold my first little game when I was 11 or 12 or something for the Apple II. By 13, I wrote the first teleprompter in Canada. And by 16, I had, a real company. 1989, which was my first year of college, I entered college with 23 employees and I was working in video games at the time, and we published the Amiga version of Dragon's Lair, which became a top seller for that Christmas season. So I spent a lot of time in video games, built and sold several companies over the years. One point sold a company to Electronic Arts. I was chief technology officer at Electronic Arts for a while, primarily focused on their interactive titles. So all of the transition from box titles to online title, Facebook games, mobile games, all that sort of stuff. So I've done everything from video games to military communication systems. And I'm always fascinated by the way that technologies actually get used and adopted in the real world. So, I'm a technologist. I love building tech. Tech is cool and I love playing with it. But what really motivates me is to understand how it gets used in the real world. And so when, from the video game side of things, we've been using, machine learning and AI and things for many, many years. So technologically, I was very familiar with it, but in 23, 24, when we turned the corner on kind of the cost and the model capability, and it started becoming something that you could use in a real business environment, I got very interested in how adoption was actually going to happen, right? So we know that this technology is moving incredibly fast, but adoption still happens on a human scale, so what it'll look like in a business context in 5 years is kind of what interests me the most. So Automately became my vehicle for exploring that, and that's what we've been doing. And we developed a whole philosophy on how to work with AI and where we think the AI is going to be in the future. And some ways we diverge from maybe more common opinion. And hopefully through this hour, we'll get a chance to talk about some of that stuff.
Great. And, I was really fascinated by your profile, Mark. Like it's a long history in the tech industry. And I'm sure myself and my audience will get a lot from you. You said it's like your exploration vehicle, what you do currently with Automately. And I'm sure as a technologist and someone, and you are my perfect profile, I would say, for the podcast, because I was talking to someone earlier today and they were asking me, hey, like why it's called the CTO show. And I was trying to explain that when I decided to start the podcast, the thing that I spotted is very rare people, they are able to convey what we call it, the technical messaging into a business understood terms without jargons, and at the same time showing the adding value. So this is exactly what we're trying to do. And because you currently, you decide to explore the AI, I will start from this, Mark. Like, of course, I'm sure you have seen tons and tons of use cases where AI can be solution for real business problems. uh, but as someone experienced and you've been doing this for a long time, I'm sure like you started to narrow down your choices to something that you thought that it would make sense with customers. So walk me through this narrowing down, because when we say AI, machine learning, automation, of course everyone hear about them today, but as technologists, to pick up one use case and build around it something, how did you decide where to start?
So I'm going to break your heart a little bit, Mehmet, is actually that's not our go to business. So our actual go to business strategy is we find partners that really understand a vertical, and
Okay.
we partner with them to understand what are the true motivations and what are the ROI considerations and the compliance considerations. What are all the levers of that vertical? And so as technologists, as AI people, we focus on building very strong, configurable, and capable platforms. So we have essentially tools, modules that we then use to deliver capabilities for specific verticals. And for me, that's actually where the rubber hits the road a little bit. The technology is moving so fast. It seems to me that trying to be the company for a specific vertical is more of a sales and marketing and business capability, while staying on top of this tiger, which is the AI technology evolution, which is measured not in weeks or days, literally multiple times a day. It gets completely disrupted sometimes. So we focus really on building very strong AI foundations, and then we build partnerships and relationships in a few different verticals where we have the entrepreneurial partners. I joke, they may not know how to spell AI, but they know everything about that business. They have the Rolodex, they understand what are the actual economic motivations, and then we work with them to deliver solutions for those verticals. So we have verticals in 10DLC onboarding, which is this very specific compliance around telecom uses in the US. People who are in telecom in the US are familiar with this. Anybody who wants to send us a text message other than typing on their phone now needs to complete this application. Their brand needs to be approved, their campaign needs to be approved. There's all this paperwork. Every yoga studio and every restaurant in the US, if they want to have any marketing messages or transactional messages, has to complete this paperwork. Because we're working with a partner who's now an actual business partner of mine, who comes from that space, right? We identified this very specific, very niche use case, which is costing them 3 to 5 hours per client, which is really hard for them to maintain. And by automating that process and hand-holding that 10DLC onboarding journey for the end user, we can cut that down to 10 minutes or 15 minutes of work for the operator and increase the first-time success rate of the submission, right? But I, as a technology guy, wouldn't necessarily understand all the nuances of that use case. It took somebody who lives in that space to be able to refine the needs so that we can use our toolbox of capabilities to build the solution.
That's a very interesting use case, Mark, and which is one of the main things we try to, as technologists, also to stress on. So you mentioned about this use case where it's shrinking the time to onboard, so these businesses can send them messages to their potential clients through their phones. Now, when building and designing, and that must be a large, I would say, and complex also infrastructure behind, I'm just guessing, right?
Yep. Yep.
So when you want to design such big system, and because, and I like your approach. You said I break your heart. Actually, not, because it's a partnership, as you mentioned, with entrepreneurial partners. So basically, you're just empowering them with the technology tools to fulfill the goal that you mentioned. But still, on the technology side, scaling with AI and making sure that it works flawlessly for maybe multiple. I'm not sure, I'm not like very expert in that specific. If you can explain that to us, Mark, is there any, and you said about the nuances, but from technology perspective, is it like something unified that it can be fit for any operator in the US, or like does it require some customization when you go and implement it? And how does it scale? Because I'm sure, like, the more they utilize it, maybe the more infrastructure they would need, the more bandwidth they would need. So if you can walk us through this, Mark.
Absolutely. So, absolutely, we are working with service providers, and these service providers have some kind of workflow platform, or they use a workflow platform from somebody else, as if they're a smaller player. So they'll be using, a Crescendo, or they'll be using, somebody like that as their backplane to deliver the services to their clients, right? Um, and so we will work with the platform operator to integrate with their platform so that we can then deliver with them and through them to all of the other clients, right? So in those cases, we are integrating with the platform. In some other cases where the platforms are becoming a little bit almost customer unfriendly and trying to hold on to the capabilities, right? We will go over the top, and we will create Chrome plugins that literally kind of take over the screen, and then we interact with whatever platform is there. One of the other verticals we're in is call centers. And one of the things that we found is a lot of the call center infrastructure providers suddenly turned off API access because they realized there's all this money in transcription and call QA and so on. And they literally tried to lock it out and own it. And so for those use cases, we built a plugin that sits in Chrome and just captures the media from Chrome, injects a little dialog box that then can provide the information or can do the conversation or whatever the solution is. So to summarize, when we have partners that understand that we can add value and add stickiness and add usability to their end users, we will work with them and integrate them as a part of their solution. But just because they don't want us to doesn't necessarily stop us from doing it, because as long as the service is delivered through a browser anyway, I have an infinite number of ways that I can then, go over the top and provide the capability that their customers ultimately need and want. And in many cases, they're hoping to deliver someday, but they're not necessarily delivering today.
Yeah. Mark, you mentioned something interesting, which is, again, it's at the core of adopting any technology. You talked about the ROI, right? The return on investment. Now, and return on investment, sometime, we measure it on, of course, the how much money we're paying now, and how much savings we're doing on, let's say 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road. But when, from a technologist perspective, you want to measure also the effectiveness of such AI systems from, again, technological perspective, not only business perspective, how we can put some numbers there to say, like, okay, we achieved this because we implemented, for example, this agent here, or you just mentioned, for example, the Chrome extension, because we did this, so this is, the amount, I don't know, maybe of time. Is it like time usually when we talk from a technical perspective? Is it like ease of use? What are like the main things that you would look at as a technologist when we come to look at the bigger picture of the, giving this ROI?
Okay. I'm gonna need to give you a little bit of background before I can actually answer
Sure.
the question. So, the first bit of background is we're big believers in what we call cooperative AI. A lot of the conversation is either generative AI, like the GPT, I ask a question, you give me an answer, or it's agentic AI, which people mostly think of as autonomous, right? So I'm going to build a solution that does something for me. And actually, we believe as a philosophical kind of foundation that the best use cases are what we call cooperative. So rather than trying to replace people, accelerating people and making them more productive. And not only does that mean that adoption is easier, there's less social barriers, there's less kind of friction for the deployment of solutions. It also means that we can deploy solutions before they're 100% working, right? So trying to get perfect AI solutions is really hard. And sometimes you can get a lot of value out of getting something that's 75% correct or 95% correct, but not 100% correct. So easier adoption, faster time to value. In support of that, we have kind of a methodology that we've created, sort of 9 steps. And the first step of that methodology is identifying what is it that should be automated first for any given vertical or any given use case, right? So I ask people, what is your equivalent of, washing the floors and cleaning the toilets? The stuff that nobody wants to do, the stuff that often takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy, may be very error prone, but also usually is very, very early in the pipeline, which means that there's going to be a lot of analysis of the output before the customer product is ever generated. So there's a lot of places where we can catch any mistakes, right? So that's kind of thing 1. Step 3 for us, after we do some analysis, is talking to our customer or our partner about what are the metrics of success for these tasks. So how do we know when the toilet is clean enough? How do we know when the floor is shiny enough, right? So those metrics are something that we develop very early. And then the very final step, step 9 for us, is when we have the system already up and running, we measure those metrics and we develop what we call a confidence measure. And the confidence measure can then be used to drive the level of autonomy that you want to give to this AI process. And so it's kind of a metric of confidence that's based on specifically measuring outcomes. And those outcomes may be how much time did we save? Those outcomes may be how correct is it? Those outcomes may be how much did it cost? Like different use cases have different metrics, but eventually it all comes down to the confidence level. And the confidence level then allows us to make decisions about how much do we use this AI process and how much we trust the AI process.
Cool. Regarding the trust, I'm happy you ended with this point because this was my next question to you. Now, one of the things we see when we're trying to adopt AI in any organization, of course, there are the frictions. Sometimes, especially if they are trying to build the generative AI thing, they might not have all the data. They might have missing, guardrails for securing the data proper way. I'm gonna come back to privacy later, but one of the things I'm hearing a lot and different opinions is convincing people to actually utilize the tools, trusting the tools. So how we encourage people to see it, because you said it's not to replace people, it's to co-work with people or to cooperate with people. As technologists, how we can convince maybe people who are a little bit skeptical about, sometimes because of what they read, there are a lot of misleading articles out there. There are a lot of people who just scare people with like AI is gonna do this, AI gonna do that. As technologists, how we can change the perception, Mark, in your opinion?
So for us, our approach is, right, start with the tasks that people don't like doing, right? Start with those mechanical, menial, time-consuming things that we all have to do as we perform our work and as we deliver the stuff that we celebrate, right? Like, in the US, we barbecue, right? Like everybody talks about, the brisket or, the burger, but nobody talks about the fact that like when you catch that fish, first you got to scale it, right? And nobody likes scaling the fish.
No.
But you got to scale the fish before you can, before you can bake the fish. So we start with those sorts of tasks, which eliminates a lot of the resistance, right? And then at the other end of it is, again, we use that confidence metric as a way to, in a mature way, talk to those users about what this thing is and what this thing isn't. It's not a magic box. It is not a tool. Think of it as a colleague, which is how we often describe it, right? When you hire a new person into the job, doesn't matter how smart that person is. First, you bring them in, then you maybe do some training, then they maybe shadow somebody, then you give them little tasks, then you give them bigger tasks. Eventually, that might become your number one producer, but it's not going to be your number one producer on day one, right? So we try to create this analogous process for onboarding these AI colleagues as a way to overcome the barriers of adoption, right? It's not a tool. It's not, congratulations, we're now using Slack, because it's not Slack, right? It is another entity in the process of delivering what your company does. It's not the company, which is sometimes, I think, where overzealous technologists sort of like, here's a tool, right? And we think of it in the terms of like 2005. I build a SaaS tool. The SaaS tool now works. You use my SaaS tool. AI is not like that.
It's completely different, 100%. Now, um, also there's something which I'm seeing a lot, because we talked about automation and mixing the AI with the automation, which is like, the agent. Everyone talks about the agentic AI. Now, some people, Mark, and it's funny because on the previous episode we were talking about this in a different, angle, but there's a lot of noise out there, right? And when I say noise, I'm not blaming anyone. It's good to create something as content, to show people how things are done. But are you seeing a lot of people who tries to implement AI, especially AI and automation, in an ad hoc way, because just they saw someone who recorded a video using these automation tools, and they are putting them into some, I don't know, MCP servers, and then maybe me as someone who's trying to understand, they show it to me like it's very simple, but when I try to go and do it by myself, I find it like it's very complicated. So are you seeing this friction also between what is being shown by some people versus the real expectation of how to do this? And I'm happy you mentioned about this 9 steps, which I can see them also on your website. So how much of education needs to happen before actually, and I know you do this through the partners, but how much you think of education happens before we touch anything, even before we start to ask them about how they do things today, so they have the right expectation of what this tool that you're building would be able to do for them?
Right. So I tend to talk to customers that maybe are a little bigger and that have, people who are responsible for compliance, or are responsible for, IT security, or are responsible for investor relations and, kind of investor rules and so on. And when you talk to people like that, the biggest barrier isn't actually the technology. It's how do we answer the questions of all the other non-technical stakeholders
Huh?
in deploying a solution to this company that has real problems. Small entrepreneurial companies, will build it, will ask for forgiveness later.
Right.
Doesn't work in enterprise, right? So we really tend to focus on enterprise rather than more, let's call it, retail end users. So we find less of an issue around the technical education. There's always some, if you've got 200, 500, 1,000 employees, there's always a couple of people, at least in the organization, who know it well enough. Maybe they want to build it themselves, and the boss brings me in and says, well, Mark's going to build it. They get a little annoyed because they want to play with the tools, right? But often we can find ways of working with those guys. But in my experience, it's less about, understanding what the thing can do. It's more understanding how does it blend into all of the other needs. Like, how does the communications department know what the chatbot on your website is going to say? How does the how does the investor relations person who needs to make sure that no news is published 30 days before the quarterly results, because that would be an actual, violation that has real penalties associated with it? How do they make sure that your chatbot doesn't break those rules and suddenly cost the company millions of dollars, right? Like, those are the conversations that for me come before deployment, less about explaining to people what AI is, because they just kind of assume that they understand. And I can disabuse them of that typically more quickly than the worries and the fears of non-compliance.
Talking about compliance, Mark, so there will be some, and you mentioned, for example, the use case of the telco. So it's like regulated also, like, and if I look to many other verticals, they are highly regulated, and I know, like, you emphasize on, having proper SOC 2 compliant infrastructures and making sure the data is private, as you mentioned now, secure. We will not have the fines. But how do we balance between, what we're trying to achieve from agility perspective, getting things done, while keeping the compliance and enterprise grade trust, with how we keep that without losing, any one of both agility or compliance?
Um, I think that the notion of agility, honestly, Mehmet, is just so based in, the last decade. I kind of think of us as living in a post-code world, in the sense that if I have a good spec, I can build almost anything in a weekend. Like, it's almost crazy how much code I can generate and how quickly and how well it performs, right? So, in spite of the fact that folks are publishing stories to sort of try to push this narrative of vibe coding doesn't really work and it breaks, right? Like, great. You can say that all you'd like. I'm shipping code with the help of AI each and every day. And and I've been doing this for a long time. And the velocities that we can achieve now are just so unimaginable even 3 years ago, that story, that narrative just doesn't make any sense to me at all, right? Um, the agility as described in, the ability to generate code, just not a barrier. The agility in terms of being able to respond to needs, respond to market forces, right? That comes down to setting expectation and setting common understanding of, again, the levers, the priorities of this vertical, of this company, of this use case, before we ever start building. And that's why, our go-to-market so much focuses on having a partner that truly understands the vertical, so I can spend lots of time with that person, really thinking about what's going to move the needle, what are the risks, what are the questions that the CFO is going to ask me when we walk into that enterprise to then sell the tool, so that we've kind of built those protections and built that analysis, and at least built the metrics around being able to give real numbers on what is the error rate, right? To that CFO, because they have an error rate they deal with now, right? So let's compare apples and apples. We can compare the cost, we can compare the error rates, we can talk about it in a mature way. It's not, fairy dust and magic and it's poof. So, like, it's not that, right? So
Yeah. I asked you about, and of course I didn't ask. I mentioned MCP, which is the Model Context Protocol, and I know you are also contributing to that. We didn't discuss it yet on the podcast, and just it came to my mind. I never asked about, we mentioned it, but as an expert, Mark, if you want to explain to us in a simple terms, what is MCP? What we are trying to achieve with it, and what could be a solution for, when we talk about MCPs?
look, MCP is not a magical thing. MCP is just another version of an API. The
Uh-huh.
difference about from a traditional API to an MCP is the MCP comes with a description of what this API should be used for that is relevant to the AI that then utilizes it. So it's a way not only of presenting the API, the functionality, but also of describing the functionality. So, do we need to use MCP? No, we could use, open API definitions and, some kind of an API interface and achieve the same goal, right? But what's powerful about MCP is it's a standard. And so now we can just adopt the standard and not have to guess, are we running on Windows or Mac or Android or right? We're using MCP. So that's the power of it. And one of the things that has until very recently been different about the introduction of AI to other technology phases is that there's been very rapid non-combative adoption of standards. Somebody puts up their hand and says, I've got a standard for something, and everyone says, great, let's just use it, because everyone's moving too fast, right? So Anthropic says, I've got MCP, everyone says, great, let's just use MCP. Google says, hey, I've got A2P, everyone says, great, let's just use A2P. Like, because everybody understands that these things have to be solved, and whatever, don't care. Like, yeah, you did the work of, it's very kind of open source minded, right? Like, this thing works, I'm just going to use it and move ahead. Only literally like this month did we finally hit on an AI standard that suddenly is going beta VHS, and that's in AI payments. And I find that very interesting that that's the one place where suddenly we are building camps. And so now we've got this kind of the Google, right, kind of sponsored with Visa and MasterCard. And then we've got now, Stripe kind of offering their own. So this is like the first time in the AI cycle that we've actually like formed camps. Until now, it's just been very easy adoption for standards. I know I kind of went off script there for your MCP question, but
No, it's
basically,
great.
yeah, MCP is just a way to have a standard interface to access services, right? Like, no magic to it. It's just a way of encapsulating APIs in a way that's easy for an AI to consume.
I'm happy you mentioned about fast. And of course, we were discussing before I hit the record button about how fast things are going. Now, when building these AI tools, Mark, yourself, I'm just making up things. Of course, you're the expert. But let's say you decided that, for example, for this use case, uh, this should be the LLM without naming any. And this should be, the way we automate things. And you build the prototype, your partners who understand the market very well, they tell you, yes, this is exactly what we want. But after 2 weeks or maybe 1 month, let us not exaggerate, things change and you figure out that okay, maybe you know what, like this LLM would be a better choice now. So these decisions in putting what where, how the fast change in the technology is affecting also the decision for you which one to adopt.
That's a great question, and that's a very, very important thing that you bring up. So we don't ever make that decision. So we write everything configuration driven. So I like literally request by request, I could change the config files and change my API provider, change the model I'm using, modify the prompt. Like, we don't code anything. So we create, technology frameworks, and then we do configuration client by client, even within a solution, right? Because we're working with enterprises, each one's a little different. Each one needs something a little different. I'm not writing code for stuff. I architect things so that they're very, very adaptable. So for example, I mentioned to you the plugin that we created for Chrome that we can use to assist the agents when they're talking on the phone to customers. So this is a call center solution. It listens to the call. It puts up, suggestions on things, so the customer starts talking about what are your hours, right?
Uh-huh.
It looks up in the database, says, the hours for this office near them is, 8 to 5. Okay. I literally could activate that plugin for this conversation right now, and it would look at the URL, which is StreamYard, and then say, do I know what to do with StreamYard? And if StreamYard is one of the platforms that we support, like Google Meet or Zoom or whatever, then it'll know, okay, for this company, I can get the speakers' names from these fields in the page, sends that to the server. The server says, okay, I know about StreamYard. I know exactly what you're looking at. Here is the use case we have. The Mark is signed in as him, so this is his knowledge base, right? Like all of this stuff is entirely configured. So I don't write a different plugin for every use case or even every website we go to or every platform we integrate with. It's literally all config driven. And the configuration includes the prompts. The configuration includes the models, right? The configuration also, we use a lot of Python. And the configuration also includes like the configuration of the tools. So I can add a Python module and deploy a new tool call to use that Python module literally without stopping anything. So the next time the system calls OpenAI, the new tool's already in place and it can use it. Like I haven't rebooted, I haven't restarted, I haven't done anything. It literally, like, that's
Real
the
time.
quality we build into it, because that's what it takes today. Because as you say, like we're in the middle of OpenAI Dev Week, right? Suddenly we have new toys to play with. By
Yeah.
next week, they'll be in my code.
So is code becoming a commodity? Because at some stage the code was the core thing. So
Yeah.
now is it like
Well-
becoming the abundant thing that I don't need to worry about? What I'm understanding from you, Mark, and makes a lot of sense to me, by the way, is now the importance is how much you understand the use case you're trying to solve. It's not about the code you write. Did I get it right correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I said already in this conversation, I say this all the time. We're living in a post-code world. Code means nothing. If you show me a use case, I can have it built in 3 hours. The commodity, the value, the kind of inherent company value of today is trust and attention. How much do you trust Mark to give Mark your company jewels and have him do something with those jewels, polish those jewels, cut those jewels, and not give you diamond dust at the end, right? And
Right.
then access, which is again where our partners come in, right? If Mark calls Fred Smith, the president of company XYZ, Fred Smith doesn't know Mark from Mehmet from Joe Blow, right? So I have no value. Because I'm coming in with a partner who he's known for 25 years, I get the benefit of that trust, right? So these are the only things of value. The code, the technology, it means nothing anymore in my mind, right? Like we're so used to thinking about, I'm going to spend 2 years and then the code capability is going to be the moat, and like means nothing. Somebody who has market access can build any tool that I can build in a week.
So the moat becomes, and I'm saying this, it's how human you are with what you do. I mean, this human connection, of course,
Yep.
and the trust, like, and your
Right.
network, and how much, as you mentioned, how much market access you have. Because, I'm seeing a lot, I receive a lot of pitch decks, and, every time I see, yeah, our moat or like our value proposition, we have AI powered, I don't know what. And I ask, I'm not here to criticize people, but sincerely, I ask them, guys, can you explain to me what stops someone to go and take this, put it in any of these vibe coding tools, and get almost the same thing? Maybe, yeah, they need to tweak it multiple times, but what's the difference?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but and I see people struggling on this point because they think the code is still the propriety, which is not, and the propriety is actually the team. I mean, the team as knowledge, trust, how much they can, you know, uh, deliver the message also in the proper way, so people can understand what they are trying to do. So on that point, also, do you see also like, of course, code, as you said, we are living in post code. When it comes to infrastructure, and we see a lot of talk about, okay, who owns, for example, the power horse of what makes the AI works. Are we seeing, now back, as you, because you've been more than me in this, Mark, and I'm asking you because when I mentioned this to people, they hit me on the head. No, like, you're going back. I'm seeing, like, if you are now kind of an NVIDIA company or AMD company, or like, the ones who own the infrastructure and, the architecture of the AI, you actually have the more than software company. And I'm telling them, actually, software is not anymore eating the world. It's something else that must be eating the world. What is that, Mark, in your opinion?
Well, as I said, for me, it's attention is the basic currency of the current world, not just in technology, but well beyond. And in enterprise specifically, the trust that sits behind the attention. We are living in an attention economy. We can create so much content, we can create so much code, we can create so much of everything. The only thing that's actually valuable is the attention. Because
It just
otherwise,
needs
you
time.
drop your rock into the lake and it disappears without ever making a ring, right? Like, it's great you built the software. If nobody ever notices it in the sea, or in the mountain, in the tsunami of code that's being written right now, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah. From your also perspective, and you mentioned enterprise a lot, but are you seeing any other big opportunities of this cooperative AI adoption? Like, you gave example of couple of verticals also. Are you seeing this also possible in maybe SMBs, in government? Like, where are we seeing or expecting bigger opportunities when it comes to cooperative AI?
I mean, I think that cooperative AI is going to be the dominant way that people interact with AI in 5 years. That's kind of my thesis, if you will. And that's in every walk of life. So, for example, we've built one solution that's really cool for healthcare providers, right? So you walk into a clinic where you don't necessarily have access to a senior experienced doctor, right? You have a nurse, or you have a medic, or somebody who can evaluate and who can, they know how to measure stuff, but they're
Yeah,
not a surgeon, they're not, or whatever, right? So we built a solution where we can take the patient histories, so the insurance histories of millions of people. So this is like all their diagnostic codes, all their treatment codes, all their billing codes. So we have like their entire treatment history, right? We take that data set, because there's HIPAA and lots of compliance around it. So
right.
that data set gets fully encrypted. Okay. We then use that data set to do RAG in a fully encrypted way. So now you walk into a clinic somewhere, the nurse or the medic says, what's called the presentation, age, and what the complaint is, and blood pressure, like all the stuff that they've gathered. That also gets encrypted. We take that encrypted question, we put it into a RAG with the encrypted data. It all stays encrypted the whole time. So you send in gobbledygook, it does RAG in gobbledygook, it sends back gobbledygook, and only that practitioner can decode the answer. And the answer is, here are the highest probability things that are going on, and here are the next tests and things that you could do to validate it based on doing RAG on all of this insurance information. Okay.
Wow.
So really cool technology, because we're doing full RAG encrypted, right? Very cooperative use case, right? Because the AI isn't talking to the patient, and ultimately that medic is using their experience and their ability to interpret, to say yes, no, okay, I'll do this test. But also suddenly this person on the field has much faster access to the entire library of medical knowledge as shown by practice. On top of, now we can look at medical books, now we can look at other sources of data to layer in.
So it's like as if I get, and of course, in the healthcare, it's the medic, the nurse. But I mean, if I take what you just mentioned, Mark, I apply it to any vertical. It's like getting an expert on demand, like just with one click of a button, and
Exactly.
all with the compliance. I'm really impressed, like doing this in encryption. It's like something really big because one of the biggest thing, and I know from my old days when I used to be in the networking and networking security, the big thing, if you're trying to send a package, for example, and you need some kind of acceleration or something like this, you need to decrypt the encrypted data so that device understand what is the packet is
Right.
before sending it. So you're telling me you can do this without decrypting the data.
Without
The
decrypting
decryption,
anything.
so it gets decrypted only with in-house, let's say, without leaving the premise. So this is really, really fascinating. Um, if we want to ask you, because we talk about like really these cool technologies, if you want to advise, people who are planning to start something with AI, Mark, and I'm seeing like you're touching on real use cases using the technology, giving value. So me, if I want to start a new startup today, what do you advise me when I plan to use AI in my startup? What should I avoid or what should I not miss? I should have it with what I'm building.
I think that as technologists, we often make the mistake of starting with a solution and then looking for the problem, right?
Yeah,
Um, what we really need to do now as technologists, and what we really need to teach new technologists, right, is how to figure out the problem first. Like what do we know about? What do we have access to selling? Right? Where do we have either attention or trust, or ideally both? Because those are our differentiators, right? Our ability to write code is not our differentiator. Our
right.
differentiator is what are these two things? So that's number one. Number two is the recognition that in a post-code world, what matters is actually the product and not the process. So, all of us have been doing, agile development for 2 decades, right?
Right.
But those of us who are old enough to remember waterfall development,
Yeah.
where you create the spec and then you write to the spec, right? That is actually the correct methodology again, because you want the attention, you want the trust, you want to then work with the stakeholders to identify what actually needs to be built. And then you give that spec to the AI. It does 95% of the work. You polish it, and then you have a company.
And if you want to repeat that again, it's not like taking the same time it used to take at the, this is why people left Waterfall, because it was like so time consuming. Although like great products came out from the Waterfall methodology, and sometimes when people ask me, this is back in the day, like what do you prefer? I say like there's nothing wrong, nothing right? So it depends on the use cases. And the only reason why people shifted to Agile is just, there was some use cases where you needed different methodology where waterfall wasn't working. So that, really completely makes sense. Mark, in your opinion, we talk about the cool stuff. What do you think one of the buzzwords in AI that, when you hear it, you say, yuck, I don't want to hear this anymore. It's so overrated.
Um, Vibe coding has come to mean a lot of things to different people. I think that vibe coding as a way for people who don't understand software development to try to write software is a giant trap that, YouTube has created. To your earlier point, you see somebody with these 3 prompts, I created, okay. Now,
Exactly. Thank you.
you're not showing me the 3 other hours you spent them cleaning up, number one. And number two, you had no control over the product, right? You're showing it to me backwards. You're saying, look at the great thing that this thing created. But in the real world, you want to tell it what to create and then have it created, right? Like make me a scheduling app actually isn't a real world use case. I need a scheduling app that connects with this and that does this and that says this, right? So now suddenly this whole like vibing is not really where it's at, right? And as I said, I use automated coding all the time, but there's a correct methodology for it, which is more akin to waterfall development, where you develop very good requirements and then you let it do its thing rather than, vibing, right? So nothing wrong with the term, something wrong with what it has come to mean, right? So that's the one thing. The other one is, agentic AI, because it just means nothing. It just means so many things that it actually means nothing. Right? So I like talking about the outcome or the process, right? So I think cooperative AI, I think generative AI, agentic AI to me makes sense in the context of, independent agents that do stuff for you, like you launch them and they do something. To me, that's an agent. But agentic means so much more to different people that it's become kind of like margarine. It doesn't mean anything. So those are kind of my two.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned about these YouTube videos, because exactly what I don't want to point out to specific people. I respect everyone who tries to do something. Maybe they don't have the bad intent, by the way. I can understand this. But showing it, yeah, it's easy, and I did this and I did that. I can understand, some people, they need also to make a living out of it. But what I say, like, don't show it that it's so simple. I have a CTO who came on the show, became a friend also as well. Like, he was telling me, my biggest problem now is that people who vibe code, which they are non-technical people, he said, like, they are like family and friends, and I have to go and sit down and try to understand what they were trying to build. And I'm telling them, guys, like, it's not done this way. For me, and I'm a little bit moderate here with my views, I tell people, if they are not technical, I said, look, guys, like, similar to the no code vibe that was there. And by the way, I tried to enroll myself in this, although, like, I can code, but I wanted to see how they see it. I said, maybe it's a communication mean to go to a technologist and try to tell them what you're trying to do, because maybe sometime they're not getting your point, you're not technical enough to explain. So maybe it will help you to have a communication, but it's not to build the main tool. And I can say, without naming, actually, I tried all of them, they are excellent. But if you are not expert, they will not give you what you are actually aiming for, because I tried even with very good prompts, and but I was like in this mindset, I'm assuming I don't know coding, and I'm giving it a prompt and see what it will come up with. And of course, like all AI, it can hallucinate, it can get you a bunch of stuff that have no sense.
And even if it's giving you something that's working, the chance of it being secure, the chance of it being compliant,
Right.
chance of it being scalable are approximately zero, unless you set out those requirements in the prompt. And so, like, I spend a lot of time when I, AI code, conversing with, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. But, just literally, like, I'll walk my dogs and I will talk about the architecture of the solution we're working on. And I will have, a couple of hours of that in, and then summarize that and then generate the requirements from that, because I'm thinking about it like an architect, and I'm thinking about, all of the different angles and identifying the use, the edges, and identifying, the criteria for success, and, all of that stuff. And then from that, develop the requirements, and then from that, develop the prompt. So if you don't go through that, which is basically waterfall, right?
Yeah.
If you don't go through that, then you're going to end up with crap.
Yeah, and you know what freaked out what some people who were trying to build something. Of course, I like to tease people sometimes. I said, guys, I think you're gonna have in the future some technical debt. And they said, what? What is technical debt? I said, yeah, because you're trying to build it by yourself. You don't know how to scale it. Maybe the AI wrote the code in a way that it's not scalable. And then maybe even you start to use it, and maybe some people start to use it, but you figure out, oh, it's something popular, there is demand on it. And now, okay, how you take it to the next level, what you gonna do with it, you're gonna end up probably to give it to someone who knows how to code, right? Maybe with AI or not, and to build it from scratch to you. So I tell them it's good just to like hand on, maybe try to understand how you create a small MVP and try to go and show to people around, but it's not the actual end product that you will come up with. To your point about agentic AI, I was joking with someone the other day, and there are like, of course, I work in sales as well. Although like I was an engineer, I work in sales, but I have still my technical roots. And I told the guy like I'm irritated every time I see someone who maybe doesn't know what AI stands for, and he's saying, yeah, like the future is agentic AI. I said, what is the future? What he means the future is it's agentic AI. What does it mean? Like I don't like people who throw like these cool words. And I said, you know what? By the way, I was, still very early in the podcast when, these early attempts of doing the agents. So
Yeah.
there is something called AutoGPT and Baby AGI and, these open source. And I was telling people like 2 years ago, I said, guys, it's nothing new here. Of course, it gets much better, but these concepts aren't new. People are always trying, the technologists try to automate things because this is what we like to do. We were lazy. We like to get things done faster. So I'm happy you mentioned these two, and I agree 100% with you on that. Uh, as we're coming almost close to the end of our, really, I am enjoying the discussion with you today. So where people can get in touch with you, Mark, like where they can find out if they want either like to partner with you or maybe to get in touch and learn more about what you're doing.
So automately.com, AUTOM, the number 8LY.com is our website. I am the only Mark Vange on the whole internet. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me, on a lot of social media platforms. We have a Medium channel as well that where we post stories and discussions about this stuff. And yeah, I'm especially for folks who are kind of entrepreneurial and who want to figure out how to ride the this tiger to greater success, but maybe don't have the technology chops. We love to talk to you guys and to partner with you on bringing really good, capable solutions to your markets. So that's kind of what we do.
Great. And I will make the life easy for the audience. So all the links you mentioned, they will be able to find them in the show notes so they don't need to
Thank you.
search. Yeah. So whether it's the website, your LinkedIn profile, the Medium also as well. So everything will be there. Mark, I can't thank you enough. I know how busy it can get as a founder, as a business owner. So thank you for giving me 1 hour of your time today. I appreciate that. And this is how I end my episode. This is for the audience. If you guys just discovered this podcast by luck, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, give me a small favor as you're trying to see to figure out. I'm getting people like Mark who are expert in what they are doing to get reality in front of us and do meaningful things. Today we discussed about the AI without the buzz, through business cases, and how Mark can help you actually if you have this entrepreneurial spirit of building something on AI to solve real problems. So, my ask from you, if you liked the episode today and you like the show, and I know there's a lot of people, they say, yeah, we know about it. Subscribe, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you are one of the people who keep coming again and again, thank you very much. Thank you for the messages, encouragement. I couldn't keep doing this for almost 3 years now without all your support and seeing that I'm able to give value to you. And this is my whole purpose of this podcast. Thank you for making us on the top 200 charts in the Apple Podcast platform in multiple countries all this year since Jan till now in October. And thank you also for the encouragement and thank you for the support on everything. As I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.